The government complex in Seoul is the home ground of the leisure club. The law that even a mutt eats half of his house. Therefore, entering here is no different from entering the middle of an enemy camp. There was more tension and gloom than ever. I'm more worried about whether I'll be able to get home safely, rather than whether I'll win the debate. Suddenly, I missed my mother and Ellie. Several groups had already gathered in front of the office building. Some are affiliated with the Ministry of Leisure and some are private. The banner fluttered. Strengthen game regulations. 500 crimes per year due to games. If you play a game that kills people, you become a murderer. If you play games, your grades will drop and your brain will break. Parents want it. Implement strong game regulations immediately. In front of him, the chairman of the Parents' Association to Raise Children Safely, the Aki, shouted with a loudspeaker. When my child comes home from school, he doesn't eat, he doesn't study, he just plays games. I play PC games on my computer, I play mobile games on my cell phone, and I play console games in front of the TV. If you don't let me play, I'll scream and rebel. My child who didn't watch pornography and only knew about studying. The game is ruined. Taekyu, who was watching him in the car, said, I will become a great pro gamer in the future. Surprisingly, game companies set up small booths on the other side and gamers gathered in front of thousands of people. It may not be a big deal in Korea, where hundreds of thousands of people gather for one demonstration, but it is rare for gamers to gather like this. To support us as we all head to the leisure department. They didn't stand, they just flocked to the word of handing out limited edition costume coupons. I've heard of the event, but I thought it would be as effective as this. They aren't really giving out slogans or cheering, but seeing them gathered makes me feel reassured. We entered the discussion hall. It was originally used as an auditorium, but the layout was slightly changed for discussion. A lot of people had already gathered inside. A total of 4 people were sitting on the right side of the forum, including Minister Shin Minmi, and the moderator was in the middle. The moderator is said to have professionally hosted various discussion forums hosted by the Ministry of Leisure, so in reality, it can be said that he is on the other side. And in the audience, about 30 parents and people from related groups were sitting. The game regulation issue has been receiving intensive attention since OTK Company came out. Therefore, reporters with permission from the Ministry of Recreation were also present. For Taekyu, who doesn't want to show his face to the public, he took the camera angle diagonally so that only his voice came out. Contrary to me, who felt fear, Taekyu's expression was nothing. Having him by my side makes me feel a little more secure. We exchanged greetings before the discussion began. Said the moderator. Then I will start the discussion on the healthy use of internet games for adolescents and the healing of game addiction. The first to speak up was Min Hak-yu, president of the National Youth Health Association. He was the only male member of the leisure club. He listed the problems with the game. As such, the game is seriously addictive and meandering. Look at Kangwon Land. It is operated under strict government regulation. But why are you so opposed to the game regulations? He was crazy from the start. Is gambling and gaming the same? He said it as if it was normal. The essence is the same. Both are included in the 4 major addictions, and there are studies showing that the brains of game addicts are the same as those of gambling addicts. Gambling itself does not create any added value. Wealth is simply transferred from one side to the other according to the number of cards. If possible, it would be better to eliminate them altogether, but since it is difficult to do so, horse racing, bicycle racing, and casinos are operated under strict government control. However, games are an industry that creates enormous added value. That is why many countries are making efforts to develop the game industry. In the first place, you think that gaming and gambling are the same. Is there any need for such a discussion? There is also a study that suggests that if you play a lot of games, you get sperm. Yes. Of all the stories I've heard in my life, it's shocking enough to fit in my top 3 fingers. Taekyu said as if he was embarrassed. No, I just played a little game so I could be an eunuch or infertile. It is the result of research conducted by a reliable Japanese scholar. If you play a lot, the frontal lobe degenerates and the cognitive ability of the brain decreases. Also, the brain turns into a dementia patient, which increases violence and the urge to kill. A book that studies this has also been published in Japan. If this were real, it would feel like a Nobel Prize in medicine. Of course, this is bullshit, and the book was treated as garbage even in Japan. However, it is being used as a means to justify game regulations after coming to Korea. Then all the brains of pro gamers must be broken? Director Min Hak-yu nodded at Taekyu's question. That's right. They are professionally trained and only last a little longer. Statistics show that the academic achievements of current pro gamers are lower than other students. It's a sign that something is wrong with your brain. Wouldn't it be strange if you were working as a pro gamer and studying at the same time and your grades didn't drop? I asked him. No, so the point is, are you saying that games make your grades down or that they cause murder? It is both. You know the PC room murder case in Yongcheon-dong a while ago? Suspect Kim Young-soo was found to have played online games for 5 hours before committing the murder. Can we still say that there is no connection between games and violence? Taekyu countered. If you go into any PC room right now, there must be a lot of people who have played for more than 5 hours. Not all of them are murderers. There is a statistic that 25% of shooters in American school shootings usually enjoy FPS games. I don't know how they did the research, but it's probably not wrong statistics. Because originally 25% of teenagers play FPS games on a regular basis. If that's the case, there are statistics that 99.99% of teenagers who usually play FPS games don't cause mass shootings. He said nervously. I am not joking around. Even if conservatives and liberals debate, it is unlikely that they will run parallel to this extent. Taeyong responded. There are many students who study well while playing games and get into first-class universities without problems. Director Min Hak-yu firmly shook his head. No. There is not a single student like that. Taekyu made a face that he was well caught. That statement is too easy to refute. Then he quickly pointed at me. Even he and I played online games in the PC room every day. Why are you dragging me? Parents who came to the hearing were a little muffled. Everyone knows that I graduated from the Department of Business Administration at Hankook University. Isn't it every parent's dream to send their children to Korea University? I said calmly. I didn't go to a first-class high school and I didn't receive any special tutoring. Nevertheless, as you all know, I entered the Department of Business Administration at Hankook University. The reason is that when I get tired of studying, I relieve stress through games. It was because I stopped playing games and made my studies bleed since I was in high school, but I decided not to say that. By the way, I didn't take any tutoring, but I went to the academy hard. How many people go to Korea University with textbooks and EBS alone? During my university days, I went to PC rooms with my classmates and seniors and fought battles. There are very few Korean university students who can't play games. If I had a team fight with other college students, I lost everything, but I decided not to mention this either. The lower the admission cutoff, the better the game. My parents listened carefully to me. A title from a prestigious university would have such an effect. That's why everyone is more like Korea University than Korea University. Chairman Min Hak-yu was perplexed. As the parties between Korea University are in front of you while playing the game, the logic is broken. Confused, he pointed at Taekyu and shouted. The vice president we played with didn't even go to college. Taekyu nodded without changing his expression once. Because I wanted to start a business. Like Bill Gates, he thought it was better to just start a business than to drop out of Harvard and start a business. I grew up dreaming of starting a business while playing games. The reason that Jin Hukong went to Korea University and that OTK company was created is all thanks to the game. Chairman Min Hak-yu shouted. Do not lie. I told him. Face Note CEO Mike Goldenberg also said. If I hadn't played the game, I wouldn't have been able to start Face Note. It is true that I said this. He actually went to Harvard University. The person who will be the original can do anything. Attorney Park Hae-ji appeared on behalf of Chairman Min Hak-yu, who lost. She is a representative lawyer at Zay Law Firm and a former legal advisor at the presidential campaign, Chong Min-hyo. Currently, she is working as an advisory lawyer for the Gender Equality Promotion Agency. She said in a strong tone. It's true that the vast majority of people who play games don't commit crimes, she said. But should we consider them separate from criminals? I think this is a context in which the society as a whole is not looked at. I asked absurdly. What kind of sit-in system is that? Then why are we demanding an apology from Japan? The current generation in Japan is not a war criminal. But why are we asking Japan for an apology now? I resisted wanting to scream. Why the hell is Japan here? If the current generation in Japan apologizes and reflects on the actions of war criminals, it cannot be said that it is bad to pursue them. Likewise, the majority of gamers do not defend criminals, so why should we blame them? We have to look at society as a whole. Can't we just pick up this part of what we see in reality and say no? Look at Kim Young-soo standing in front of the photo line and making excuses. Is that person a criminal? Are he and other gamers completely unrelated? Then what does it have to do with it? We played the same game. If you don't say anything to students from the same school, to people who ate at the same restaurant, to people who live in the same building, or even to your family, why should people who play the same game take responsibility? Of course, the game is the problem. Before I could counter it, she brought up another topic. Let's look at another issue. According to a recent survey, gender discrimination and misogyny in the game have reached serious levels. Isn't this place to discuss game addiction and regulation? Said the moderator. This discussion also includes this issue. Continue. I looked at the discussion material. When asked about gender discrimination in the game, more than 80% of the respondents really answered, severe, or very severe. Where did you ask for this? The survey was conducted at Sungduk Women's University. The subjects of the investigation must be all women, right? Now that's not too surprising. Attorney Park Hae-ji said without even pretending to listen to me. Take the war class for example. The game characters here are all male and the female characters are mostly staying in secondary roles. War Class is a popular mobile game. Takyu rubbed his eyes and said. Read more at wuxiax.com. It's a war game. It's set in the Roman era and we're only fighting with soldiers. So, making a game like this where women can't play is just gender discrimination. I asked calmly without panicking. Why is it important to set the game character ratio to be 5-5? Why is it so important to hit a 5-5 match? The problem and dissatisfaction we have is that the proportion of female characters in the game is too small. What's the benefit of having a higher percentage of women? The problem is that the ratio is low, so increasing that ratio solves our problem. Is the low itself a problem? Yes. That is the problem. What causal relationship is this? Half the world is women. Still, the fact that there are fewer women in the number of game characters is because it reflects class. Then should the Roman and Carthaginian soldiers who appear there also be changed to be half male and half male? It's a subordinate job. I don't think it's necessary to make men and women equal for characters with relatively low social status. All you have to do is insert the character you want to include. We want to make sure that only important characters who are in high-ranking positions like commanders are equal in gender. Am I the only one who doesn't understand this? To be precise, only me and Takyu didn't understand. The other participants seemed to agree with the words of lawyer Park Hae-ji. She said triumphantly. The problem of discrimination against women in the game is serious. Therefore, it is necessary for the Ministry of Recreation and Leisure to solve this problem with regulatory authority. I gave up on understanding any more. Hey, but that's it. There are a total of 6 lawyers at Zay Law Firm where you are a lawyer. Except for the CEO, there is 1 female lawyer and the other 4 are male lawyers. After all, 4 out of 5 are male and the ratio is 80%. You have argued that the ratio of senior positions among game characters should be equal to male and female. So why did lawyer Hae-ji Park set the male to female ratio at 8-2? Isn't it possible that while claiming gender equality only in words, you are discriminating against men and women and hating women? She was perplexed that she had been stabbed in the corner. What? Why are you talking only about lawyers? There are more women in general staff. Takyu said excitedly. It doesn't matter what the subordinate position is. In fields with relatively low social status, there is no need to equalize men and women, and you can choose the person you want to hire. But you said that high-ranking positions such as lawyers must be equal in gender. That. As she thought hard about what to say for an excuse, she couldn't find a suitable excuse, so she jumped up and shouted. Are you doing a background check on me now? I answered calmly. It was there when I just went to the website. Going into someone else's company website is a behind-the-scenes investigation. I will sue you. Like a lawyer, he seems to like to do things according to the law. I nodded. Yes. Complain. Then the director of the Youth Protection Agency and the director of the Home Health Promotion Agency took turns. It was a repetition of the same story as before. Awakened, a game-addicted sim, and the health of adolescence, and the logic that violence intensifies when playing games and commits crimes. It's just that the game is worse than gambling and drugs combined. Can be said that it is an evil of mankind beyond a social evil. At this point, I don't know if I should call all the game creators and put them to death. If you play games for 16 hours a day, your chances of getting a herniated disc or herniated disc increases. We need to increase the time of the shutdown system to protect the health of the youth. Of course, sitting down and playing games is not good for your health. Even if you study for 16 hours a day, your chances of getting a herniated disc and herniated disc increase. But it's okay to get hurt from studying. What would you say if you spill your coffee while studying? And finally, Minister Shin Min-mi came out. Although we exchanged word of mouth several times, this is the first time we have met in person. I wanted to avoid seeing you forever if possible. Minister Shin Shin-mi said as if sternly rebuked. OTK Company is a global conglomerate. However, we have to fulfill our social responsibility to establish a sound game culture, and I think it is shameful to only represent the interests of the game industry like this. Why should a company be ashamed to represent the interests of the industry? Then the minister is only representing the position of the Ministry of Leisure. Aren't you ashamed? In fact, it is shameful to have such a discussion in a place like this. Why am I doing this here? I feel painful and weird. Minister Shin Min-mi widened her eyes at my words. The status of parliamentarians and ministers in Korea is remarkable. But she does both. In a way, she has both legislative and judiciary powers at the same time. So who could have said this in front of Minister Shin Shin-mi? In particular, it is not an exaggeration to say that game industry officials have been skeptical. There is a difference between the interests of private companies and the interests of the public. OTK Company sells Lost Fantasy M through OTK Games Korea. Think about the negative impact this game has on young people. I said calmly. The content that teenagers enjoy, such as movies, dramas, music, webtoons, and web novels, is diverse. But why should only games be treated as harmful media? So, it is a problem that will be solved if we make a sound game according to the rules. There are guidelines for this. I said, looking at the materials I had prepared. A guide to making internet games for teenagers? Yes. This is a guideline made by the Ministry of Recreation in the past government. It is divided into 3 categories: compulsive interaction, excessive reward structure, and inducing a sense of superiority and competition. If you look at paragraph 1, it is said that in order to raise a character's level or ability, it should not be possible to share roles with other people and cooperate, or to perform quests with team members to give a sense of pride. Section 2 says that if you play the game for a long time, the problem is getting cyber money or items or improving your level and skills. If you look at Section 3, the problem is giving you the feeling of dominating the game, being a powerful person and having an influence, being a person who is superior to the game over reality or competing with others. Minister Shin Min-mi said proudly. That's right. It's all about the game. One thing I don't understand is that in Section 1 the problem is cooperating with others, but in Section 3 competing with others is the problem. Which one is right for you? She looked at her material for a moment with a bewildered expression. Both are a problem. Inducing compulsive interaction from team play is also a problem, and it is also a problem to induce a spirit of excessive competition. It's even more problematic if it makes you feel fun or proud. If you don't feel fun and proud and you don't compete, then why play games? In a word, this is no different than telling us to make porn that isn't naughty. Then let's apply this to our studies. Shouldn't you feel proud while performing group assignments with your team members? Studying for a long time to gain knowledge, improve grades, or receive scholarships is an overcompensation and should be banned. Studying hard and getting in rank can push others out of the competition, giving you a sense of superiority, so this is also a problem. According to the guidelines of the Ministry of Leisure, shouldn't we ban children from studying first? Studying and playing are different. The more good food you eat, the better, but bad food should not be recommended. Taejayu said. Then what about esports? It's a game that plays a game. Secretary of State Shin Jin nodded her head. I think esports should be regulated too. Are you trying to uproot the game industry altogether? I said right after that. Just sports. During the Winter Olympics, Minister Shin Min-mi cheered the female curling representative and said, I was moved by the unity of Korean women. In team competitions we share roles and cooperate, and we feel proud when we play together. And if you compete against teams from other countries and win, you will be rewarded with medals and prize money. Isn't this the sum total of the problems of the game, such as fun, pride, cooperation between team members, competition with other team members, and excessive compensation? So should the curling team be disbanded? U.S. Secretary of State Shinjin raised his voice. Don't keep comparing games to things like studies or sports. Gaming is classified as one of the 4 major addictions, so for comparison, it is correct to compare it with alcohol and gambling drugs. His 4th addiction. I don't know what the hell they were thinking of grouping games into categories such as alcohol, gambling, and drugs. In any case, since the legislation came out, games have been treated more like an addiction than entertainment or leisure. If you look at the regulation bill this time, the Minister of Leisure is to collect 1% of sales from game companies as a fund and 5% as a penalty. What industry has these regulations? There may be misunderstandings in that part, so I will state it clearly. Instead of walking the 1% uniformly for all game companies, you can set it below that. Isn't it a problem that the minister can set it up as he pleases? This is a fund for establishing the Internet Game Addiction Healing Center and assigning game addiction teachers to elementary, middle, and high schools. We are raising funds with good intentions, so we will of course have to cooperate. It's a game addiction healing center by giving way 100 times. But what about a game addiction teacher? If game addiction is a disease, you should get treatment from a specialist. What should you do with a dedicated teacher? Of course, the Ministry of Leisure will be in charge of selecting and educating this game addiction teacher. It is a kind of job creation. Some game companies have bigger overseas sales than domestic ones. By the way, the funds come from the Korean Leisure Department. According to the minister's argument, the money earned by poisoning children of other countries will be used to treat children in our country. What will the people of that country think? Perhaps it was an unexpected point. Minister Shin Mi flinched. It's rude to talk like that here. Yes. For a moment I thought I heard it wrong. Can I use these words in a discussion? The moderator paid attention. The discussion is very heated right now, so please be careful about what you say. To me, not the Minister Shin Mi. What the hell is this discussion? What's the point of arguing with people who firmly believe that they are absolutely right in the first place? Still, I did my best until the end. The Ministry of Recreation said that it would raise funds for the treatment of game addiction, including companies that make casual games and educational games. These companies have nothing to do with gaming addiction, so wouldn't they be harmed by consistent legal use? Secretary of State Shinjin nodded his head. Of course, I admit that there may be some companies that do suffer. But it is an unavoidable sacrifice. Although there may be injustices felt by individual companies, policies must be implemented for the cause of society as a whole to protect youth and women. Rather than refute with examples of individual companies or specific companies, please have a perspective that encompasses society as a whole. So, are you saying that the sacrifice of the few for the justice of the majority is inevitable? That's what I mean. As far as I know, there was a politician who said the same thing in the past. Who is that? This is Adolf Hitler. At my words, the discussion room was turned upside down. Minister Shin Min-mi shouted. Are you saying I'm like Hitler now? I never said that. I just said that Hitler said the same thing. Vile and disgraceful. What nonsense is that? I shrugged. No, the problem is that the minister said the same thing as Hitler. Is it not my fault for pointing out that the minister said the same thing as Hitler? Before I could finish my words, everyone jumped up and pointed and shouted. Even the moderator, who had to be stopped, got up and poured out criticism. There was a discussion and a riot. At this rate, it seems like it would be a good idea to be merciless. At that moment, Taekyu slammed the table hard and got up. In a situation where everyone's attention was focused, Taekyu brought out a shocking story. After the discussion is over, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family released the transcript. However, the content was completely messed up. Nonsense was changed in a logical manner, and our words only emphasized the provocative part. I'm so upset that I can't even speak. Criticism poured out against us. Haha, I can't have a discussion after the gangjin. Look at the nonsensical argument. It's because I've been playing games. Gaming ruins your brain. If you like the game that much, don't discuss it, just play the game at home. Minister Shin Jong-mi was like Joan of Arc. Girl crush, happy face. Attorney Park Ji-hye, like a lawyer, speaks coherently and well. She became a fan of her from today. I feel so reassured that such a person is an advisory lawyer for the Gender Equality Promotion Agency. You're pushed out of logic, so you're saying you're a Hitler. How could you say something like that? I'm so angry that my hands and feet are shaking and I'm in tears. Fighting Minister Sin Dark. I sighed. This is really disrespectful and mean. It was already expected that the opponent would come out like this. So before that, I hired one of the media outlets to cover the discussion. They were all media outlets favorable to the leisure department, but their attitude changed when OTK Games and the 5 major game companies decided to push out a large amount of advertisements. Taeyong smiled. The press grows on advertisements, not public love. The media company that decided to receive the advertisement released a video of the full version of the discussion. The reporter in charge said, "The transcripts released by the leisure department have been edited and manipulated. Our media company will release all the video of the debate for the public's right to know. I would like to inform you that no editing has been done except for the slight alteration of the voice of the vice president of OTK company, who wishes to remain anonymous." When the video was released, articles poured in all at once. Breaking news: editing and manipulation of transcripts from the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family. Whose order was it? Irrational debate. There is no constructive alternative. Secretary John Mi-shin totalitarian remark that sacrifices of some game companies are inevitable. The medical world, the game brain is a fiction. Who is Park Ji-hye's lawyer? The name of Zay law firm is taken from the gender equality personal pronoun. Minister Shin Shin-mi was originally famous, but lawyer Park Ji-hye has been in the media spotlight for this incident. Her press rushed in for an interview, but she took a vacation and went into hiding because her swell of attention was burdensome. She even closed her homepage. Surprised, the Ministry of Leisure and Entertainment strongly protested the press and pressured each press to take down the video of the discussion and correct the article, but the video had already spread overseas. Not only game sites but various other sites were also heated. Weaving the transcript. Did you think it wouldn't take? Where have all the kids who were on the side of the leisure club gone? Sindark, haha, my hands and feet are shrinking. Joan of Arc seems to rise from the grave. She told the Minister of Gender Equality that she spoke like Hitler, so she spoke like Hitler, but why is she speaking like Hitler? It was an amazing discussion. The participants of the discussion clearly demonstrated why the Ministry of Recreation should not regulate the game. Attorney Park Ji-hye is great. You can't separate a gamer who commits a crime from a gamer who just plays games at home. I was told that the important characters in the game should be equal male and female, but I actually chose male lawyers, haha. How can we hire more men for senior positions like lawyers? My hands and feet are shaking and I'm in tears. How the hell did you get a lawyer's license with that head? Other people's activities are not that easy. Anyway, I can't play the game. But the real surprise was something else. This is the last remark of the vice president of OTK company, which was completely cut from the transcript. In the full version video, the remark was revealed as it is. Thanks to this forum, I have a clear understanding of how this country treats the game industry. The minister won the debate. As a former vice president of OTK company, I will fully accept the regulations of the leisure ministry. At those words, Minister Shin Min-mi's expression brightened. Really? Yes. From now on, according to the will of the Minister of Gender Equality and Family, I will stand on the side of the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family and take the lead in uprooting and eradicating the Korean game industry. Before coming here, I finished talking with domestic game companies. If we can't convince the minister at today's debate, all game companies will leave Korea. Minister Shin Min-mi was bewildered. What? Under the leadership of OTK company, we will delist all game companies listed on the exchange and relocate our headquarters and corporations overseas. In the future, companies that manufacture games that are harmful media and addictive substances will not be able to set foot in Korea. I clearly state that all of this is solely the work of Minister Shin Min-mi. Now, are all the problems resolved? The shocking remarks of the vice president of OTK company. Do domestic game companies really move abroad? This is just a suggestion, there is little possibility of realization. Secretary John Mi-shin, deputy representative of OTK company, should be held accountable for his remarks. the Ministry of Recreation and Aspect Equality Activities Promotion Agency, I can't contain my anger at the threatening remarks from the game industry. Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, in accordance with the guidelines, takes strong legal action against articles and comments that undermine gender equality. The government and public opinion, including the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, regarded the OTK vice president's remarks as implausible blasphemy. But that was because I didn't know OTK well. Domestic game companies moved in an orderly fashion under the leadership of OTK Company. About 30 game companies, including the 5 major game companies, reviewed the specific timing and plan for the separation of the Korean corporation and the relocation of the headquarters overseas. It is impossible for all personnel to leave Korea immediately. However, it is possible to separate development and service into subsidiaries and move the holding company overseas. To this end, it was decided to hold a general meeting of shareholders and submit a letter of intent to delist to the exchange. When this happens, shareholders usually react. But this time things were a little different. The stock prices of game companies were plummeting due to the hardline stance of the Ministry of Recreation and concerns over game regulation laws. If the bill is really passed and it pays 1% of its sales to the fund and 5% as a penalty, then the net profit will drop sharply or run into a deficit. Therefore, shareholders raised their hands in favor of overseas relocation. The announcement of group migration by game companies immediately shocked the economy and stock market. Pornography doesn't have an industry in Korea in the first place. Therefore, whether or not the regulations are tightened, there is no impact to the industry. It just makes it harder to download illegally. However, games are already an important axis of the IT industry. That's why NPL, Google, FaceNote, and Microsoft do not spare any investment in the game field. The area where game companies were gathered was in turmoil, and even the surrounding house prices fluctuated. Inquiries from homeowners flooded the brokerage firm. In the real estate market in Pangeo and Bundang, the buying force disappeared in an instant, and some broke the contract right before signing the contract. Exodus, haha, just like Moses took the Jewish people to the land of Canaan, the vice president of OTK Company left with the game companies. Because the persecution was so severe. Where will the diaspora be built? By the way, didn't President Ha Chong-min criticize the former government policy during his candidacy and say that he would make games an important industry? The government raises it as a core industry, but the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family regulates it and collects money. It's similar to a nuclear power plant. Korea phased out nuclear power, but encouraged export of nuclear power plants. But then what will happen? Are all domestic games shutting down? It doesn't matter anyway. It will serve as a foreign game service in Korea. And if you are going to impose ridiculous regulations or collect money like now, you can file a complaint with the WTO. Moving to the US solves all problems. Korea is good for being a game-clean country, the US is good for nurturing the game industry and creating jobs, and the leisure department is good for kicking out the game industry. Hey, it will be cool in the leisure time. I was trying to rip a little bit out of the control as an excuse. If the game industry leaves, who will the funds go to? Do not worry. You just need to regulate webtoons and manga. If you change the 4th addiction to the 5th addiction by including comics, everything is solved. Now it seems like Pororo is going to tell him to spit it out by pounding it out, happy face. If it's a leisure woman, then that's all there is. The next victim is Pororo. Wait. Now, a support group for the Ministry of Leisure is pouring out research results showing that looking at Pororo damages the brain, increases violence and decreases sperm count. Establishment of Pororo Addiction Healing Center. A dedicated teacher for Pororo addiction is assigned to each kindergarten. Let's not touch President Puh as a human being. The whole world was in turmoil at the announcement of the group relocation of Korean game companies. In the case of automobiles made in country A and sold to country B, customs duties and VAT are paid to country B. However, sportswear, including games, is taxed only where corporations are located, wherever they are sold. So, in the case of App Store and Google, which operate the App Store, they spun off the App Store and have a corporation in Ireland. Ireland has the lowest corporate tax in the EU. In other words, a country that attracts game companies can reap huge tax revenues. The competitiveness of the Korean game industry is well known. There are many games that have already secured a large number of users, and there are many excellent developers. can create enormous employment and added value just by attracting them. Love calls came in from various countries and cities. Among them, Detroit was the most active. Detroit, as we all know, is the center of the automobile industry. However, Silicon Valley collapsed with the big one, and Carlos took a seat here, attracting related IT companies to form a cluster. Thanks to this, Detroit has rapidly emerged as an IT industrial complex as well as automobiles. When OTK Games, which was in Tokyo, decided to relocate its headquarters to Detroit to cooperate with Karis, the city decided to create a game cluster after abandoning it altogether. As Korean game companies showed the Exodus movement, they started to attract the governor of Michigan and even the mayor of Detroit. We will make Detroit the center of the game industry. We will review various support and tax benefits and provide dormitory and land for free. President Ronald did not stand still. He immediately tweeted, "Welcome to the United States of Korean game companies. Americans love games and know how to have fun. Above all, there is no Ministry of Gender Equality and Family in the United States." As everyone knows why game companies are leaving Korea, the last words were nothing more than a mockery. The government would not have blinked an eye when it was announced that one or two companies would be relocating to avoid regulation. However, it is a different story if the entire industry is moving collectively. An OTK company has enough money and influence to move all domestic game companies overseas. When this happened, the situation was so serious that it was simply considered a boycott or slander. On behalf of President Ha Chong-min, who was on a European tour, the ministerial meeting was held under the presidency of the Prime Minister Ryu Jong-hoon. Ministers from all ministries attended without exception. All the ministers, except for the Minister of Recreation, expressed concern about the situation. In a situation where the manufacturing profit margin is less than 10%, the game industry profit margin is over 20%. It is a high-value industry. Games exported $8 billion last year alone. Exports this year alone have increased by more than 30% compared to the same period last year. It is an industry that is growing by more than 20% every year, and it has been transferred to foreign countries. How are we going to mobilize talent? Each game developer is a national talent. If key personnel leave the country, the Korean game industry will become subordinate to foreign countries. Other countries are anxious because they can't develop the game industry. Does this make sense? This incident has become a laughing stock abroad as well. It is a total international disgrace. Right now, tax loss is also a problem. When all the game companies go out, who pays the tax? Even if we do not use the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid," as an example, economic policy is the most important thing for the government. Because ideology does not feed the rice. Right now, Korea is already struggling with a poor economy and an increase in the unemployment rate. This is due to a structural problem of the industry rather than the current government's responsibility, but it is clearly the government's fault that it has failed to solve the structural problem. While industrial restructuring was sluggish, all ministries were struggling to raise the employment rate. But in this situation, what will happen if game companies leave Korea all at once? Decrease in exports, decrease in tax revenue, increase in unemployment, decrease in employment rate, outflow of talent, loss of industrial competitiveness, etc. The biggest problem is the drop in approval ratings. Small game companies have hundreds of employees, and large game companies have thousands of employees. If you consider the tens of thousands of direct employees in related industries, there are hundreds of thousands. What kind of people will like it if the economic loss increases due to negligence and anti-corporate sentiment towards a specific industry? Although this manpower will not go abroad right away, if game companies relocate their headquarters, there is a high possibility that key personnel will also leave. The Minister of Science and ICT said, "Korea has weak software competitiveness compared to manufacturing competitiveness. If all the game companies really leave, the Korean software industry could collapse." Shin Min-mi, Minister of Gender Equality and Family, objected. What is the connection between games and the software industry? It is not logical to say as if the entire domestic industry would suffer damage just because the game industry leaves. He shouted in frustration. Do you know that game developers only make games? Since it's the Unreal Engine used to make games, everything the Scrap Engine does is software. A game developer develops software and a software developer develops a game. Please keep your mouth shut if you don't know. After the ministers finished their remarks, Prime Minister Ryu Jong-hoon opened his mouth. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family will hand over the authority to regulate the cultural industry to the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and from now on, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family will focus on women and family issues. In addition, the Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, please contact the game industry and try to resolve the matter as soon as possible. Minister Shin Min-mi was astonished at those words. It is not so. In order to protect youth and women, the Ministry of Leisure must have regulatory authority. Prime Minister Ryu Jong-hoon, who could not stand it, shouted in a voice mixed with anger. Now that the subject of regulation itself seems to disappear, what is the use of regulatory authority? Do you still have something to say after you've made the situation to this point by rushing to kill a thriving industry? These are the instructions of the president. If you have any complaints, ask the president directly. After the ministerial meeting, the Blue House announced that it would unify the authority to regulate the cultural industry to the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. The Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism decided to immediately meet with the CEOs of game companies and listen to their difficulties. Even if we do this first, we want to appease the game industry. However, Minister Shin Shin-mi, who was responsible for causing the incident, held her position without taking any responsibility. Netizens could not help but marvel. Hey, does it make sense to not get fired even for that? No apology. Read more at wuxiax.com. Why the hell are you wearing such a new beauty? Did you catch any weaknesses? Because she has strong support from women's organizations. What are you thinking about now? Did you not know that this government was originally elected? I'm going crazy. I didn't know it was this much. He seems to hold his position until the change of government. No compromises in moderation. If you leave it alone, it gets boring again. Please take this opportunity to respond clearly. Just tell him that you're going to evacuate. Despite the government's announcement, the game industry refused to engage in any dialogue. Rather, it seemed to speed up the separation of the corporation. If it had been before, it wouldn't have come out this strong. However, things have changed since OTK Company came out. It wasn't just because OTK Company was rich and influential. The vice president clearly understood the difficulties of the game industry and was willing to continue to support it in the future. This was a fact that can be seen enough just by looking at the creation of the OTK award. In the meantime, the game industry, which had been responding to regulations in a ruthless way, came together. The vice president will do everything for you. There is hope, there is hope. Right. I have lived without hope. Believe in the vice president and fight to the end. The government, who thought they would agree if they offered to talk, was bewildered. Minister Kim Kuk-cheon personally met with the vice president of OTK Company and persuaded him. But the answer that came back was firm. We are only following the will of Minister Shin Min-mi. If you don't like the temple, the middle will tell you to leave, so what's the problem? Don't worry too much, because we will take all the roots of the Korean game industry and plant them abroad, and then give them plenty of chemical fertilizers to make them grow well. What would you like to do? If there is anything you want, please tell me. In response to Minister Kim Kuk-cheon's question, Deputy Representative Taek Yu-oh said, "Game development is a lot of work and the salary is high. Even so, everyone works overtime every day and even on weekends with the determination to make fun games. What the hell did they do so wrong? At least you shouldn't ignore the fact that you won't be able to treat them." However, some people treated game developers as if they were gambling or manufacturing drugs. Wouldn't it be difficult to have a conversation with someone like that if he continued to hold a key position? Although the Blue House pressured and criticized within the party, Minister Shin Shin-mi did not bow down until the end. In the end, Prime Minister Ryu Jong-hoon issued an apology on behalf of the Minister of Leisure. "I sincerely apologize to everyone involved in the game industry and everyone who has been hurt by excessive regulations and radical remarks. The government clearly recognizes that gaming is a proud Korean cultural industry and a key industry that will lead the future. In the future, we will actively reflect the opinions of the game industry for proper regulation and growth, and we will spare no effort at the government level." President Ha Chong-min, who is on a European tour, fired Minister Shin Shin-mi in writing. He decided that Vice Minister Cha Yun-hai would act as the minister until a new minister was appointed. It is not uncommon for governments to step down on regulatory issues. In particular, the sacking of U.S. Secretary of State Shingen was a shock. This is because the president is known for his strong trust and is a key figure in the current government's gender equality policy. Therefore, when she was sacked, her parents' groups and women's groups criticized the government for succumbing to the game industry cartel. Yoon Nak-young, leader of the Liberty Korea Party, raised her voice in the National Assembly. This is a measure that the government has taken a look at the giant corporations and abandoned the responsibility of protecting youth and women. Is the president a senior deputy spokesperson for OTK company and the game industry? The ruling party strongly protested this remark, and the National Assembly, which was held in a short time, went into lameness. Representative Shin, who was sacked from her ministerial position and returned to Parliament, attended a meeting with female executives scheduled. On the spot, she criticized the government. "I became a proportional representative because I was a woman, and because I was a woman I could be a minister. I know how important this is because I am a woman who has been greatly benefited. I was able to come this far because I am a woman. But for the current government, which emphasizes gender equality, to exclude women from high-ranking positions in this way, it is a wrong thing that goes against the flow of the times." Then a female executive spoke up. She was an executive at Golden Gate's Korean branch. "I don't quite understand what you are saying. Since a man will not take the position of Minister of Leisure, in the end, another woman will take the place. So, does it have nothing to do with your sacking from the ministerial position and the government's exclusion of women from high-ranking positions?" At the words that stabbed her in the right direction, Senator Shin was bewildered. After all, women should be given more opportunities. In support of startups, additional points for women should be increased, and preferential measures for women entrepreneurs should be further expanded. Currently, support for women's startup under the Women's Business Support Act, preferential purchase of women's business products from public institutions, and preferential treatment for women's business support are insufficient. Were not the women here able to rise to executive positions thanks to these supports and benefits? Then she gently shook her head. "No. I have come to this place only with my own ability and effort." Up to this position, she competed fiercely with the people around her regardless of gender, and she never received any benefits just because she was a woman. To say that she was able to become an executive because she was a woman, I think it undermines the abilities of all high-ranking women. The other female executives in attendance nodded her head in unison as if sympathizing. But Senator Shin continued to work with women's groups to argue that a 50% quota of female executives in private companies should be enforced, which she helped slash approval ratings for the new political party. After the government's announcement, most game companies withdrew their overseas relocation plans, but some companies decided to leave Korea as planned. There were a total of 4 places where they expressed their intentions. Among them, Ronsoft, one of the top 5 game companies, was included. Not only dissatisfaction with the regulations, but other reasons also played a role. Jun Baek-yoon, president of Ronsoft, said, "After meeting and talking with the vice president of OTK company and the president of OTK Games Ichikawa, I felt that my instinct as a gambler that I had forgotten about was awakening. It is every developer's dream to create a virtual reality game that people around the world can enjoy. We want to be involved in development together." According to Take-You, most of the managers of Korean game companies are developers, and there are many cases where they like the game itself. Is it the desire of all developers to develop fun games? Despite the opposition of the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and constituency lawmakers, they decided to move their headquarters to Detroit and held a general meeting of shareholders as scheduled. Lonesoft decided to relocate its headquarters to Detroit. Passed the corporate separation plan at the general meeting of shareholders. The dark future of the Korean wave of games? Government responsibility cannot be avoided. They directly employ 10,000 people. Not all of these personnel will be fired or relocated to the United States right away, but the government can't help but be embarrassed. The government and the Ministry of Recreation were again criticized, and Vice Minister Cha Yoon-hai worked hard to fix it. So Yoon Nak-young raised her voice again. Companies are fleeing overseas due to incompetent economic policies that only call for regulation. The evil on the left must end now. What the hell are you saying? Didn't you say that you were on the side of the game industry until yesterday? It was the Liberal National Party that originally proposed the addiction treatment law, as well as making a shutdown system. But you're right, the companies that pack up and leave now are wise. I bet as the election season approaches, fans will knock on the game company again to beg for votes from parents. You can tell just by looking at Shinji Onmi, who is still restless and drags aggro. Could it be an ex-woman dispatched by the Liberal National Party? Just go to America. As President Ronald said, America does not have a leisure department. It was a pity that he was leaving, and the government and the media suddenly cried out for the importance of the game industry. That games are the #1 exporter of cultural contents, that the Korean game is a filial piety, and that the trade deficit in intellectual property rights has been minimized. The government held a meeting for the development of the game industry, and the media sent out articles showing games every day. It is unbelievable to be treated like alcohol, gambling and drugs until a few days ago. Surprisingly, Taekwondo did all this. It's good to know how important the game is to this industry. But Taeyong shook his head. How long do you think this atmosphere will last? After all, if an incident occurs, the government or the media will likely blame it on the game again. Murder, bullying, school violence, shooting, etc. It's all because of the game. Did we get hit once or twice? Anyway, now that the atmosphere is friendly, the game industry is fighting a tug-of-war with the government and trying to win concessions as much as possible. As for game companies that are sneakily trying to step out of self-regulation, Take-You nailed it, saying that no matter what, it must be pursued with certainty. In this situation, Lost Fantasy Online ended its open beta service and officially launched it in Korea and Japan at the same time. From now on, you have to pay a certain amount every month to enjoy the game, but in Korea alone, it hit a jackpot with 200,000 paid subscribers on the first day. Games are more distinct than any other content. If it fails, the publishing cost is blown for nothing, and if it succeeds, the entire production cost can be pulled out within a few months. At this rate, it will be more than enough to recoup the production costs within this year. As Lost Fantasy Online surpassed expectations, the Vermorpk development plan became easier. As a part of the development cost can be financed by itself, the burden on investment has also been reduced. Thanks to this success, Shigeru Ichikawa's reputation has grown even more. But that did not mean there was no crisis. The star developer who created the Lost Fantasy series and a person who made games that reached the limit of technology every time, made the public enthusiastic, but after the merger of Linux and Pentagon, it suffered a slump for a long time, and eventually even developed due to disagreements with the management. It was even said that the Lost Fantasy series was over, but after leaving Linux Pentagon and setting up OTK Games, he proved his competence by making consecutive invitations on mobile and online. People praised him as the resurrection of the game emperor, and paid attention to his next move. OTK Games separated its Japanese subsidiary. After all, most of the shares were owned by OTK Company, and the rest was held by Shigeru Ichikawa and the development team, so there was no need to open a separate main gun. He then proceeded to relocate the headquarters to Detroit. This matter was being discussed with the city. The city council began reviewing tax benefits and site provision. The development of Vermorpk Surana is the biggest mega project in the history of gaming. Some experts still had doubts about its feasibility, and it was expected that there would be numerous technical difficulties. However, Shigeru Ichikawa will surely overcome those difficulties and create a game. If successful, how much added value will it create? Who would have imagined that banks, shopping malls, bookstores, etc. would appear on the internet? Once a virtual reality game becomes a reality, there is no law that prevents such things from being made in the game. In a way, it's more than just a game, it's about creating a world. $10 billion in development cost alone. This is the largest development cost in game history. We are making a game that has never existed before, so we don't know how much more can actually go into it. The world's attention was focused and investors showed great interest. There are 3 reasons for this. The first is that various technical foundations such as VR technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data processing, etc. have been prepared. Second, Shigeru Ichikawa's development capabilities are excellent. And finally, OTK Company decided to invest the development cost. OTK Company has achieved tremendous success in all of its investments so far, and has never failed. Once, even in a seemingly impossible business, if Warren Boat invested in it, the chances of success would suddenly seem high. In this case, the investor's reputation is certainly helpful. He expressed his desire to invest from various places. Even if it is $10 billion, OTK company will be able to pay the development costs somehow if it makes up its mind. However, as you can see from this situation, games are heavily influenced by government regulations. Therefore, it is necessary to establish a cooperative relationship by involving local companies or investment institutions. Wichamp publishing manager flew from China, and RCK Brothers, Asia's largest private equity fund, also showed interest. Nicholas Carlson, head of operations at Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund (GPFG), visited Korea in person. Norway is sparing no investment in IT and game industries. This is because it has little to do with oil and is a high value-added industry. However, there was an unexpected person accompanying him. She is about 160 centimeters tall and has a cute appearance. A woman in her early 20s with an impressive freckle remaining on the back of her nose. She was Princess Annika of Norway. This is her first time coming to Korea. The two came to the OTK company headquarters right after getting off the airport. It's even more nice to see people I've seen in Norway again in Korea. Hyunju Nuna and Ellie also exchanged greetings. Princess Annika was delighted to see Ellie. I heard a lot. I also saw advertisements. In fact, you look more beautiful. Ellie smiled. Thank you. I asked gently. Any advertisement? Oh. Ellie pinched my side hard and I quickly bit her mouth. Princess Annika spoke with a lively expression and voice. Congratulations on your Lost Fantasy Online success. I do it every now and then and it's so much fun. I think Shigeru Ichikawa is great. Taijayu said. Norway doesn't serve it yet. I am in the process of connecting to a Japanese server. The princess is said to be able to speak Japanese to some extent. Japanese is essential for doing good. While we were talking about investment with General Manager Carlson, Princess Annika talked about games with Take-You. The appearance of Princess Annika, who was chattering with her brown eyes twinkling, was quite cute. The conversation between the two continued while they ate. If games are the subject, Take-You can talk non-stop for 3 nights and 4 days. I was perplexed when I saw that. Why the hell is she so tangled up with her? Are you a demonic otaku? Or do you have hundreds of billions of dollars and a halo behind you? After hearing my words, Ellie rolled her eyes. Aren't you supposed to be envious? Could it be? Seems a little bit envious.